vast majority of our players are great men. They're great sons. They're great husbands. They're great fathers. We have nearly 3,000 players in any given year, and we're going to have people who make mistakes. And we want to make sure that we do everything to prevent that from happening.
What do you do when it does happen? That was NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell addressing questions about the NFL's new personal conduct policy after saying that with these early cases we've heard about, he blew it, especially the Ray Rice case. All right, so what about this new policy? Is it enough? Let's bring in people to assess. We have CNN commentator and legal analyst Mel Robbins and former president of the NFL Players Association, George Martin, New York Giant, wished he was a Jet. We'll leave that for another day. Mel, let me ask you this. Goodell admits he blew it, then says, I met with Bratton about the right thing to do. We're going to deal with the machine, but let's deal with the man first. Did he say the right things? Is he in the right position now?
Oh, good morning, guys. And I laughed that you just had to get that jab in there, Chris.
Just
he did say the right thing. I mean, yeah, he did say the right thing, Chris. I think it's important that he admit his mistakes, and I've got a lot to say about the policy, but in terms of how Goodell is now handling the press conference, he's doing a decent job.
All right, so let's put up what this new policy is. It's very unusual. I spoke to a management consultant who said we would never storyboard our thinking this way. This is the statement from the union, okay? They're saying that they're upset because they weren't consulted about what this policy is. They were just given a professional courtesy to review it before it hit the press. But I also want to put up what the policy is. George, let me ask you about the statement that we just had up. The union's carping. They should have consulted with us. Should they have?
Absolutely, without question. I don't think that you can implement a unilateral policy that's going to be as far-reaching as this is without consulting the people who are going to be impacted, and that is the NFL Players Association. I think the fact that they left Morris Smith out and he did not have an opportunity to give input was a serious flaw on part of Goodell.
The presumption is that the union would want less, right? That they would want to see their players not be punished as much for things like this. Maybe that's why they were excluded from the dialogue.
Well, that's an assumption that could be true or false. And I think that you run the risk that if he does get it wrong a second time, I think that you're going to incur the wrath of not only the NFL Players Association, but the general public once again.
Put the policy back up there again, Mel. And the reason I want it up there is because this management consultant said to me, this flowchart thing, here's the problem. It shows that they're going to have this procedure they follow, but he believes that it's an example of how they're not set up to do this, that they're not set up to investigate potential crimes. They're not set up to punish this type of behavior, and that it's flawed in its premise. What do you think?
You know, Chris, it's an excellent question, and I agree 100%. And, you know, just listening to what George had to say, I think what the union wants is clarity. And what I found interesting about this flow chart is that it illustrates two things. First of all, these cases are complicated, particularly when you have a parallel criminal proceeding. And secondly, I was stunned, Chris, by the fact that there's not a lot that's changed.
Right.
There's no mandatory suspension. There's a lot of words like could, may do this. And so I think as a player, I'd be feeling a little worried because I'm not exactly sure what the NFL will do. If somebody gets arrested tonight, Chris, and charged with domestic violence, do we know exactly what's going to happen? No.
There's also this gray area about things that they find out that the police don't find out. This is a tough situation, George. I mean, what's the league supposed to do? You could say, well, the policy should be this. If I hear something bad about George Martin, you're out until we figure it out. That's not going to stand with the union, will it? Especially if the cops aren't involved.
You're absolutely right, Chris. And I think what this policy does, it does create a sort of a double jeopardy because it's in some cases it circumvents the criminal justice system, number one, and it also kind of gives you the presumption of guilt as opposed to presumption of innocence. Why should an athlete be charged with something and then later proven innocent of it, and he's already been penalized by the league? I think that's a serious faux pas on their part.
If you hit your wife, your girlfriend, okay, and we have reason to believe it happened, the prosecution's had 6 games. You think that's enough in terms of what this league wants to project about who the men are who put on the helmets?
You know, Chris, far be it for me to talk about what's right or wrong relative to domestic abuse. I don't want to make the same mistake that Roger Goodell has made. I think that there are greater minds that out there should come together and talk about this collectively. I think that you should have input from the NFL Players Association as well as the league, and I think you should also have the professionals from Domestic Abuse Society to help craft this policy because it is so important.
Look, I take your point, but Mel, at the end of the day, if you get jammed up rightly for hitting your spouse or your child, the penalty is 6 games. What do you think of that?
It should be. I think it should be, and I think it should be really black and white, and the NFL shouldn't be the ones investigating this thing.
But is 6 games enough?
Let's take a look at Ray. Yes, I think 6 games is enough to get the process started. But what I'm concerned about is this. You got Ray McDonald of the 49ers arrested in August, accused of assaulting his 10-week pregnant fiancée. Guess what? The DA didn't dismiss the case. They made a public statement, Chris, that they couldn't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Why? Well, of course, because his fiancée is now not cooperating. These cases are complicated. Ray McDonald did not sit out a single game. He should have sat out for 6 games. I personally believe that you make the policy very simple by saying at the moment of arrest, you're out for 6 games. You still get paid, but the NFL, Chris, should not be in the business of being like, oh, he choked her. That's 2 more games. Oh, he had a gun. That's another 4 games. Oh, he only slapped her. That's 2 games. That's ridiculous. It needs to be a clear policy. End of story, Chris.
A lot of people are arguing, though, Mel, that if you actually do something like that, the fact that you stay in the league is odd to begin with. But we're going to have to see how this plays out because they're still figuring it out. They have problems with their union. So let's see what the next phase is. Mel Robbins, George Martin, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Chris.
All right, now, the biggest factor in this is how you feel about it because this is your league, right? They make their money off your desire to watch and accept the players in the game. So what do you think? Go to Facebook. You do facebook.com/New Day and let us know, all right? This is one of the stories we're following. There's a lot of news this morning. Let's get to it.
If another country files an arrest warrant for a U.S. official, the Justice Department would not enforce it.
I think it's a terrible piece of work.